A kingdom divided, scenes of glory and ruin. Imagine a grand temple, gleaming with gold and echoing with worship. Picture a fiery prophet challenging a wicked king. See two kingdoms, once united, now locked in bitter rivalry. This is the world of First Kings, a book filled with drama, intrigue, and spiritual lessons for us today. It's a story of God's faithfulness, but also of human failure. We encounter kings at the height of their power and witness their tragic downfalls. We see the allure of wealth and the seduction of idolatry. We are reminded that choices have consequences, not just for ourselves but for generations to come. Yet even in the midst of darkness we find flickers of hope, individuals who remain faithful to God. First Kings is more than just ancient history, it's a mirror reflecting our own capacity for both greatness and self-destruction. It's a reminder that true power rests not in armies or riches, but in aligning ourselves with the God who holds all things together. The legacy of David, a blessing and a burden. The story begins with King David, a man after God's own heart, nearing the end of his reign. He had united a kingdom, defeated enemies, and established Jerusalem as the capital. But even David, a man of deep faith, was flawed. His sins had consequences, casting a shadow over his family and his kingdom. As David prepared to pass the torch to his son Solomon, he offered these words, "Be strong and courageous and do the work. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord God, my God, is with you." In that blessing we hear a father's love but also a king's understanding of the challenges ahead. Solomon inherited not only a powerful kingdom but also the weight of his father's legacy. He faced a choice. Would he rule with the same heart for God that David had at his best? Or would he succumb to the temptations of power and compromise his faith? Solomon's wisdom, a gift, a test, a tragedy. Solomon's reign began with great promise. He prayed for wisdom, and God granted his request, along with riches and honor beyond measure. The Queen of Sheba traveled from afar, drawn by stories of his wisdom, declaring, "The half was not told me." Under Solomon's rule, Israel experienced a golden age. He built a magnificent temple in Jerusalem, a physical embodiment of God's presence among his people. He expanded the kingdom's borders, fostered trade, and cultivated the arts. Yet, as Solomon's wealth and power grew, so did his spiritual complacency. He allowed his many foreign wives to influence him, leading him into idolatry. The man who had once prayed for wisdom to govern his people began to worship foreign gods. This tragic fall from grace reminds us that even the greatest gifts can become snares if they distract us from our relationship with God. Solomon's story is a sobering reminder that true wisdom is not just intellectual brilliance but a heart that remains true to God, even in the midst of abundance. The house divided, Rehoboam's folly, Jeroboam's choice. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended to the throne. He inherited a kingdom that was already teetering on the edge of instability. The kingdom, however, was on the brink of collapse. Years of mismanagement and heavy-handed rule had left the people disillusioned and restless. Solomon's extravagance had fueled resentment among the people, especially the northern tribes who felt burdened by heavy taxes and forced labor. The lavish lifestyle of the court stood in stark contrast to the hardships faced by the common people. When they pleaded with Rehoboam to lighten their load, he rejected the counsel of his elders and chose instead to rule with an iron fist. His decision to ignore the wisdom of experienced advisors would have dire consequences. "My father made your yoke heavy," he declared, "but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." His harsh words only served to inflame the already simmering tensions. This arrogant response proved to be a fatal mistake. The people, feeling betrayed and oppressed, rose up in rebellion. The northern tribes revolted, led by a man named Jeroboam, splitting the kingdom in two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. This division would have lasting repercussions for both kingdoms. Jeroboam, fearful that his people would remain loyal to the temple in Jerusalem, established alternative places of worship in the north. He sought to consolidate his power by creating new religious centers. Setting up golden calves in direct violation of God's commands, Jeroboam led his people into idolatry. This act of defiance would haunt the northern kingdom for generations. The division of the kingdom marked a turning point in Israel's history, a moment that would define the nation's future. It was a tragic consequence of pride, idolatry, and a failure to heed the lessons of the past. The once united kingdom was now fractured and weakened. It's a stark reminder that unity and stability are fragile gifts, easily shattered by poor leadership and the allure of false gods. The story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam serves as a cautionary tale for all generations. Section 5. The fiery prophet Elijah's stand against a king. The books of Kings not only chronicle the reigns of kings but also introduce us to prophets, God's spokesmen who dared to challenge the powerful and call them back to faithfulness. These prophets were often seen as the moral compass of the nation, guiding the people and their leaders back to the path of righteousness. One of the most compelling figures is Elijah, a prophet who bursts onto the scene during the reign of Ahab, one of Israel's most wicked kings. Elijah's arrival was like a storm, shaking the very foundations of the kingdom with his bold proclamations and miraculous deeds. Ahab, urged on by his manipulative wife Jezebel, embraced the worship of Baal, the Canaanite god of fertility and storm. Jezebel's influence was profound, leading Ahab further away from the worship of Yahweh and deeper into idolatry. Temples were erected, sacrifices were offered, and the worship of Yahweh was suppressed. The land was filled with altars to Baal, and the true faith of Israel was in danger of being completely overshadowed. Elijah, a man of the wilderness, unyielding in his conviction, confronted Ahab. His rugged appearance and fiery spirit made him a formidable figure, one who would not be easily swayed or intimidated. "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives," he declared, "there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." 1 Kings 17:1. This bold declaration was a direct challenge to the authority of Ahab and the false gods he worshipped. With those words, Elijah pronounced a drought, a tangible sign of God's judgment on the land. The drought was severe, affecting every aspect of life in Israel and demonstrating the power of Yahweh over the elements. He then disappeared into the wilderness, led by God to a place of safety. In the solitude of the wilderness, Elijah found refuge and strength, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. Elijah's courageous stand against Ahab and Jezebel reminds us that faith often requires us to stand alone, even when confronted with powerful opposition. His story is a powerful reminder of the strength that comes from unwavering faith and conviction. He is a model of unwavering conviction, a testament to the power of one person who dares to speak truth to power. Elijah's legacy continues to inspire those who seek to live with integrity and courage in the face of adversity. Section 6. A contest on Mount Carmel. The God of Israel answers. The drought stretched on for 3 long years, withering the land and bringing severe famine to the people. The once fertile fields turned to dust, and the rivers dried up, leaving the nation in despair. Finally, Elijah reappeared, summoning King Ahab and the prophets of Baal to a dramatic showdown on Mount Carmel. This was to be a decisive moment, a test to reveal the true God. "How long will you waver between 2 opinions?" Elijah challenged the people, his voice echoing across the mountain. "If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." 1 Kings 18:21. The people stood silent, caught in their indecision. The prophets of Baal prepared their sacrifice, crying out to their God from morning till evening, dancing and shouting with all their might. But there was no response, no fire, no evidence of Baal's power. Their cries echoed in the emptiness, unanswered. Then, it was Elijah's turn. He stepped forward with calm assurance. He rebuilt the altar of the Lord, carefully placing the stones, prepared the sacrifice, and prayed a simple yet profound prayer asking God to reveal his power. Suddenly, fire fell from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, even the dust. The intensity of the flames left no doubt. Overwhelmed by this display of divine power, the people fell prostrate, crying out, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" 1 Kings 18:39. Their voices rang with newfound conviction. The contest on Mount Carmel stands as a powerful reminder that the God of Israel is the one true God, a God who demonstrates His might and sovereignty. He is a God who hears the prayers of His people and answers in His own time and in His own way, leaving no room for doubt. Section 7. Echoes of Faithlessness. From golden calves to empty thrones. Despite witnessing God's power on Mount Carmel, the kings of Israel and Judah continued to stray from God. They repeated the sins of their predecessors, embracing idolatry, engaging in injustice, and leading their people astray. Golden calves, symbols of rebellion and idolatry, continued to be worshipped in the north. Kings rose and fell, many meeting violent ends. The once united kingdom, now fractured and weakened, seemed to be spiraling toward destruction. The recurring cycle of sin and judgment underscores the destructive nature of sin. It's a stark reminder that turning away from God has consequences not just for individuals but for entire nations. The empty thrones scattered throughout the narrative serve as silent testaments to the fleeting nature of power when it's not grounded in righteousness. Section 8. The Fragility of Power. Lessons from Fallen Kings. The book of 1 Kings is, in many ways, a study in leadership. We encounter kings who embodied wisdom and justice, but also those who succumbed to pride, greed, and the corrupting influence of power. The contrast between their reigns provides timeless lessons for anyone in a position of authority. Solomon's reign, for all its early promise, serves as a cautionary tale. His descent into idolatry demonstrates that wisdom without integrity is ultimately self-defeating. Rehoboam's arrogance and refusal to listen to wise counsel led to the kingdom's division. Ahab's willingness to compromise his faith for political expediency brought judgment upon the land. These fallen kings remind us that true leadership requires more than just intelligence or charisma. It demands humility, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to what is right, even when it's difficult. It requires seeking God's guidance and putting the needs of others above one's own ambitions. Section 9. Choosing Wisdom in a World of Idols. The world of 1 Kings, with its competing deities and seductive temptations, may seem distant to us. Yet the idols of wealth, power, and pleasure that ensnared those ancient kings are still very much present in our own time. We too are faced with choices that test our allegiance to God. Will we pursue wisdom that is grounded in God's truth, or will we chase after fleeting pleasures? Will we use our influence to promote justice and righteousness, or will we exploit others for our own gain? The book of 1 Kings challenges us to examine our own hearts and identify the idols that compete for our affection. It reminds us that true fulfillment is not found in accumulating possessions or achieving worldly success, but in aligning our lives with God's purposes. It calls us to be people of integrity, courage, and compassion, reflecting God's character in a world that desperately needs His light. Section 10. The Unwavering Faith. Finding Courage to Stand Alone. Even in the midst of widespread idolatry and corruption, the book of 1 Kings offers glimpses of unwavering faith. Prophets like Elijah and Elisha stood firm in their convictions, even when confronted with hostility and opposition. Individuals like Obadiah, Ahab's household manager, risked their lives to protect God's prophets. These individuals remind us that we are never alone in our faith. God is always at work, even in the darkest of times, raising up men and women who are willing to be His instruments of righteousness. Their stories encourage us to remain faithful to God even when we feel like a minority, even when it seems like evil is winning. The book of 1 Kings, with its blend of triumph and tragedy, offers a timeless message of hope. It reminds us that God is faithful, even when we are not. It challenges us to live lives of integrity, courage, and compassion, reflecting God's light in a world that desperately needs His love. And it assures us that even in the midst of darkness, God's purposes will prevail.